Hi, everyone. This is Delora DeFore. I am sitting in for Dr. Ruth Roberts today. She is in Arizona and is speaking with so many huge names in the human health coaching arena. So we're really excited for all the things she's going to be bringing back to us. But I'm the program officer of the Holistic Health Coach program.
You got it,
Holistic
Delora.
Pet Health Coaching Program. That's always a tongue twister there. And I'm so excited to have Melissa Natanson with me today. We're going to be speaking about our favorite subject, the microbiome.
It is our favorite subject.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Delora. I know we've
Thank
had some fun conversations when we're not here on Facebook Live about how much we love the microbiome and how it affects everything. And it really is, just to back up what you're saying, Dr. Ruth, it's amazing. She's going out there and talking with some amazing names, like you said, because this is really a movement. Holistic pet health care, and getting to, part of the basis of what we're talking today about is getting to the root of what's causing a lot of our animals' health issues. And the gut is at the base of that.
At the base of it. And once you realize that it's just, when you work for the gut, you work for everything. So I'm so excited to talk about this with you today. But before we get into it, I would like to know more about you, Melissa. How did you get into this, and why did you get into this? I know you've been doing some pet health coaching for quite a few years now.
Yeah, I've been, I'll make a long story short. I've been running a retail store with my husband, but in the background, I've been helping pet parents and never really made it official to be a holistic pet health coach. And now I'm official. So it's especially exciting to be here and have letters behind my name. But my journey has been a long one. And it started with my rescue dog, Darla. I have had her for 12 years. We've rescued this little pup, and she was rescued off the streets of LA where she had been eating trash and junk food. And there's a reason I'm telling you this, and we're going to get to that in a second. But after I'd had Darla for a few years, I noticed a couple of things. She was having massive amounts of skin issues, and just no reason at all. She would break out in hives, and I couldn't figure it out. And of course, I was feeding what I thought was a good diet of kibble, and I hadn't really noticed or looked into what the microbiome was until one day Darla started vomiting, and one day she vomited blood, aspirated. It was a major emergency situation. Took her to the vet. We almost lost her. And it turns out she had severe IBD and bleeding ulcers. Talk about having my work cut out for me. And at that time, vets told me that she would be on medication, steroids, whatever, for the rest of her life. And it probably wouldn't be a very long one. And I couldn't accept that. So I had some background in human holistic health, and I started applying the knowledge of what I knew about the human digestion system, IBD, gut, and changed her diet, started making her food at home. And I'm happy to report that she is now 14 and thriving, and they didn't think she'd make it past 8. So she is really kind of the inspiration behind all of this.
I just got chills. Sweet Darla, do you have her with you in the room today?
I think she's with Dad right now. She just got done eating, and so she kind of has like dad time afterwards. So, but maybe he'll bring her by at some point.
That would be great. We need to see Darla, who is the inspiration. So we all have our whys and what brings us into this. So it's always so wonderful to hear why you're doing this passionate work. So let's talk about the microbiome. So can you explain to us what the microbiome is in cats and dogs?
I sure can. So the microbiome, it's trillions of bacteria, well, should be trillions anyways, sometimes it's billions, that line the intestine, they line our intestines. And these bacteria, they produce hormones, they help ferment the food so that they can digest, they activate hormones. And one of the things that they also do is that they can compete with each other. So that's why it's extra important that we have a balanced microbiome, because if they're competing with each other and the good bugs start to outweigh the bad bugs, that's where we get into problems. And that's where we see the things like leaky gut and skin allergies and all this stuff. And why the gut is really the basis of all health, because once that's out of balance, it's hard for any other system to get back on track. And when it's impacting digestion and food's not getting broken down the right way, then the cells are not getting powered properly. And we see the fallout of that all the time. And most of the time it starts with skin issues, but I know that's something we're going to get into more as we're talking about it.
With my human health coaching background, I tend to get research that's human-based first. But for humans, there are studies that show, back in 2016, one in particular showed that there are 30 trillion human cells and 38 trillion bacteria. So we as mammals are essentially more bacteria than human.
Yeah. And it's amazing to think about, I think we live in a society that's afraid of germs. We shouldn't be afraid of germs. We shouldn't be afraid of germs, because everything that we're exposed to every day, including our doggies and our kitties, and make a difference in what their microbiome does. I always kind of think of this, speaking of my background, I grew up on a farm, and a lot of times we had to learn to be our own vet. But one of the things that kind of surprises me is I feel like a lot of our pets these days have, kind of like delicate little flower guts. I call them DLFG. I have acronyms for everything. And they eat one thing wrong and there's vomiting and diarrhea. What's going on here? And then I think about our farm dogs that literally were living on like co-op special food that was chicken feathers and feet and corn, but they never had those issues. So what's the difference? Those dogs were playing in the mud, rolling around in the mud. In my case, a lot of times they were like eating the 2-day-old like cow after birth. I lived on a cattle ranch that they would pull up and eat. But guess what that is? Now, I don't advise that you have your dogs eat that. But guess what's in that? Tons of probiotics, natural probiotics, because they're getting them from the soil and things. So it's a good reminder to let your dog be a dog. Walk on the grass, walk on the ground, walk on the beach, because that affects their microbiome and what the diversity of their microbiome is.
We want to clarify that we want them to walk on the grass that has not been treated with pesticides, because
Correct.
Pesticides have been shown to kill our itty bitty bacterias. Oh my gosh, Melissa, I could just go down.
We could go. I mean, the
so
glyphosate,
many rabbit holes.
Everyone beware of glyphosate, because that does impact the microbiome, and a lot of people spray. So know where you're walking. If it's dog park, hopefully it's clean dog park. But even then, they're getting exposed to.
If you see dandelions, that's a great place to walk.
Good prebiotic too. Feed those gut bacteria. But
good we got to talk about all that too. You're giving away all of our
I know.
Here.
I need to not have the nuggets so early, but it's so exciting. Well, I mean, one of the things that we were going to talk about is yesterday I read the 2024 State of the Gut report that's put on by a company called Microbiome. And what they do is every year they test what's going on in the guts of our kitties and doggies. And they're a company that can do testing for you as well, but we can talk about that more later. So what they are finding this year is they tested nearly 2,500 cats and dogs, but what they're finding is that almost 50% of our pets are missing critical bacteria in their guts. So we wonder why there is an epidemic of leaky guts and an epidemic of skin allergies and other related inflammatory issues. And they said that 34% of our pets have bacteria in the wrong proportions. So the reason that is important is one of the things that they discovered in their study, and this is this is new emerging science, that it may not be so much about what the diversity is in the gut. It's more about what those bugs are doing in the gut and how well they're functioning as a community, because it is a community in there that stays in balance.
That's why we got to have more good guys than bad guys. Well, I hate to use good and bad.
That's true. Yeah.
Beneficial guys versus,
Beneficial guys.
yeah. But we all, things like Candida and other of the ones that you can typically hear that are bad, those are normal and they're in there. They just need to be in controlled amounts.
I like to think of the animal microbiome as like a parking lot. So let's envision that. So think you've got a big parking lot, right? And you've got where your cars are parking in the slots and the intestinal lining of the gut. It's like a parking lot. So we've got a balance of cars that come in and park, and we're going to say those are the beneficial ones, and they don't leave room and they don't leave spots for the ones that can be harmful or can overgrow if they're parked in the right spot. So they don't leave any parking spots left for the other ones. So that's the importance of balance. Where we get out of balance, if we want to picture this, is when too many not beneficial bacteria are parked in the microbiome parking lot. We want to kick those guys out so there's room for the good ones to park.
Interesting.
That's
I
how I
love
like
that
it.
analogy.
It helps me.
Yeah. So we have a question that Erin's asking about the GERD. We're still talking about microbiome, and
I
we will
know.
get there, Erin. We're going to spend a minute on the microbiome because it's just so fascinating.
It is. It is.
So how does the microbiome affect a pet's health?
Oh boy, in a myriad of ways. So it can affect everything from their skin to their digestion to inflammation levels. The gut is connected with the kidney, the heart, the liver. So if we have inflammatory issues with the heart, inflammatory issues with the kidney or heart, we want to keep that under control. Once again, going back to the gut is responsible for producing some of these hormones too. So one of the first signs that I see in so many pets that have got an imbalanced gut is skin. Why is that? Skin is our biggest organ. So if our gut, which is responsible to estimates of 70 to 90% of our immune system, is not in balance, one of the first places we're going to see it is in the gut, or I'm sorry, in the skin, because the microbiome is seeing some things. Let me step back a second. So if the microbiome is out of balance and we've got some leaky gut issues going on, that means that the food is not getting broken down properly before it passes through the intestinal wall in a way that the body can recognize it and utilize it for fuel, nutrients, and other things. So if that gets out of balance, thinking about that parking lot again, we have some other things in there, microvilli that line the gut. And if those start breaking down, then we have leaky gut. So then all of a sudden there's food passing through the intestinal wall that's not broken down properly. The body doesn't recognize it and thinks it's an invader. So then what happens is the body forms antibodies against it. So then every time the pet is eating something that it's having a reaction to, the whole body is having a reaction. And then where does that pop up? Skin issues usually come first. And then we get into digestion issues, which we're going to go into GERD. It can affect their brains. It can affect how they think, because that's also responsible for serotonin, dopamine. It's the gut-brain connection. You know, they always say that the brain is the second gut, or is it the other way around? Delora, you would know.
I like to call it the first gut, just because
The first gut.
Yeah. Or the first brain. How about
The
that?
first brain, yes.
So another aha moment for me whenever I was doing my research on the microbiome is that another huge reason that the skin is affected is because the cells in the gut is epithelial cells.
Yes.
So
is the skin. Yep. I was going to say that. And thank you so much for adding that on. I know that was huge when I'm like, those are the same cells. So
yeah, that's really cool. So can you tell me more about the signs of an unhealthy microbiome?
absolutely. So We talked about skin. Another one is if we start to see some vomiting and diarrhea, changes in the stool, that's usually another indication. One of the things that happens is a lot of times pet parents say, why is my dog licking its paws all of the time? So that's an inflammatory reaction. And a lot of times dogs will lick its paws for a variety of reasons, whether it's a yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, because that sets off a reaction that's a little calming to them. So when they do that, when they lick and lick and lick, that's kind of a way of self-soothing. So you can see that too. Allergies are a major one, whether it's skin allergies or it's intolerance to food. So, and sometimes there can be behavior issues. Also, a big one that we're starting to see more and more in our pets is how the gut microbiome is at the absolute basis of autoimmune issues. So we're talking about IBD and other, some of these other things where, like with cats, for example, they're exposed to viruses when they're younger, but those viruses kind of take hold because their microbiome simply doesn't have the right basis to hold up their immune system. And so then we see kitties that have flare-ups and issues with their skin and issues with their mouth. Oh, and then the big one. I know I have a lot of pet parents say, why does my dog fart? Well, I can tell you why. Remember the parking lot? The unbeneficial ones are parked in there, and they make gas.
That's great. So
and of course, GERD, gastrointestinal
yes,
reflux
and
disease.
you answer. I mean, I was going to say great segue into GERD. I mean, it's coming out one end, but then it's also coming out the other end, which leads to GERD. So let's talk about it.
So microbiome studies are showing that when there are, an imbalance, once again, there can be a certain overgrowth of certain microbes that not only affect inflammation in the esophagus and in the stomach lining, but they actually make a difference on how the esophageal sphincter, so there's a little flap at the base of your esophagus that heads into your stomach. And that flap is responsible for keeping food below the acid in the stomach. So if we start having some problems where that's not working properly, then we can get a backflow of acid into the esophagus, and that a lot of pet parents struggle with this. The other thing is that if the stomach is inflamed, subsequent to inflammation in the whole body, then it affects the mucosal layer in the stomach. And that's a struggle because a lot of these little kitties and doggies that are having acid reflux, and keep in mind, reflux and regurgitation is different than vomiting. You'll see kind of a burp come up and they'll start dealing with esophagitis, which is inflammation of the esophagus because the acid continues to go and sit up in there. So when we balance the microbiome, that one helps the sphincter. The other thing that we kind of get into, which is more emerging science, and we want to know more about it, has to do with SIBO and the big part that it may be playing in technical difficulty. I'm back. And the part that might be playing in acid reflux, and here's why. So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So the microbiome is largely contained within the large intestine and the colon. We want the bacteria to stay there. If bacteria is overgrowing in the small intestine where there's not supposed to be a parking lot, that's where we can get into issues because the large intestine ferments food to make it accessible for the body to use. If it's fermenting in the small bowel, guess where it goes? Backs up into the stomach and affects the what's going on in the stomach, can affect the mucosal lining and also affect the digestive enzymes. So that's a really important part of it.
So interesting. I just I want you to repeat everything because it was so interesting. I guess I'll have to go back and watch the recording, right?
I mean, it creates, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So, it creates hydrogen and methane gas. So, one of the ways they test for SIBO in humans is they have you blow into a contraption to measure if there's any of that gas coming out, but that's hard. We can't, it's like blow kitty, we can't, that's hard to do with our animals. So, it's one that is of special interest to me. I'm going to keep working on it and get to the bottom of it, because I feel like it's affecting a lot of animals. The imbalance in the microbiome is shifting into becoming more SIBO issues from what I've seen. Which makes it especially important. But there's also different things that we have to do in regards to probiotics. We can't just throw probiotics at it, and we'll get into that more later.
Right. Well, let's talk about, again, beautiful segue. What is the best diet to prevent GERD?
Well, we always want to say that a fresh whole foods diet is the best. Kibble, I'm sorry, y'all, if you're stuck on kibble, it's a big fat no-no. It's hard to keep on going with kibble. And there's a couple reasons why. So think again about how the microbiome is fermenting some plant matter for dogs, not for cats. Cats are obligate carnivores, so they really need mostly protein and very little carbohydrates. But with dogs, they do have some carbohydrates, and the gut ferments those. So the issues can be with kibble when there's a lot of starchy carbs and there might be overgrowth in the small intestine. Then those starchy carbs just feed it. So we continue to have the gas buildup, and we continue to have backing up of acid in the stomach. And so that's really hard. So whole fresh foods diet and making sure that there's a right balance. The crock pot diet is great. And there's some commercial brands that are out there, whether it's raw or freeze dried or you cook at home. And then I also recommend, from a Chinese medicine standpoint, a lot of this is heat and dampness. So both in the gut and in the stomach. So proteins that I recommend for that are turkey, duck, and rabbit. So keeping it on the cooler side. Another thing that is important to include is kind of bitters and things that help promote the digestion. So Delora, I talk about all the time. One of my favorite leafy greens to add is dandelion greens, because there's a bitterness to them. They also spur digestion, and they help the gallbladder work better. And we want that to go on there. So we're open to any questions about that. That'll help. And there's also a lot of supplements that can help that too, because we want to increase digestion and kind of decrease the discomfort that our pets might be feeling that continue to contribute to this.
Do you have any other supplementation recommendations for a healing protocol? So obviously, number one is fresh food feeding. That's what you need to do first, and make sure that your pet is doing well on that fresh food feeding before you add a whole bunch of supplementation. Yeah. But what would you suggest? And I'll see if I can find some links to that you talk about.
Well, and now, of course, with SIBO or acid reflux, there's other things that everyone needs to check with their vets, hopefully holistic, that can make sure we don't have a hiatal hernia going on. That once again has to do with that esophageal flap. Or sometimes there is a, migrating motor complex, and that is the muscles that make things move from the stomach to the small bowel. And sometimes there can be some dysfunction there. So we want to make sure those aren't in there. But going back to Darla, because she, not only does she have IBD, she had major acid reflux. We think about the herbs that helped humans, first of all, with this. And so what I started giving her, slippery elm can be very beneficial for dogs and kitties that already have esophagitis. I love deglycerized licorice. If it's glycerized, sometimes it can affect the adrenals. So I really like licorice. Aloe vera is fantastic. L-glutamine, which is a building block for the gut and helps soothe the stomach. And one of my favorite products is the Heartburn TX. I think there should be a link on there because it contains the L-glutamine and N-acetylglucosamine, which is also coating to the stomach and helps build up the microbiome. Also has the aloe vera. So that can be really great. And then I've been in the habit of, I buy fresh ginger and I cut it up. And I brew it on low for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I put just like a half a teaspoon in Darla's food before she eats, because that can spur digestion, help spur motility. And once again, the reason that this is important, tying it back, that we need good digestion is because that's the first step to what the microbiome is using to break down. So if the food is heading down to the microbiome already not digested, then the job that the bacteria in the microbiome have to do is even harder and can increase the imbalance in the gut.
So you mentioned SIBO earlier. Tell me about if probiotics and SIBO.
So SIBO it's a tough one.
Can you tell us what that
Sure.
acronym is?
So SIBO, again, is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So once again, going back with SIBO, there's bacteria growing in the small intestine. And remember, the cars are supposed to be parked in the large intestine. So throwing probiotics at it and continuing to have the bacteria grow in the small intestine sometimes isn't the right approach. So for example, there's lactose and bifidose bacteria. Sometimes that can have the opposite effect for SIBO than what we would want to have. And there'll be another important point after this regarding just, tossing probiotics at the microbiome, because it's important to rotate them as well. So a lot of research is suggesting that using a soil-based probiotic that's not necessarily feeding the major ones. So we've got, everybody's heard of bifidose and lactobacterias. Those are the major ones. But if they're growing out of control, then a soil-based probiotic can be one way to tackle it. And also just making sure that we're fortifying the gut and setting the stage for the right microbiome, whether it's with some humic and fulvic acids, or there's some products that contain a silica that still, coat and seal can help as well. But it's really tough for pet parents to figure out whether there's a SIBO going on. And that's something that they need to talk with their vet about. If probiotics make it worse, you had a great suggestion on this, Delora, when we were talking, which was the raw goat's milk, which contains a tons of probiotics. If you try something like that and it gets worse, that might be a good indication that there is bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. And with a lot of pets, we'll see, if you're wondering, like, how would I ever know if this acid reflux or SIBO, which most of the time are tied together, we see the regurgitation. We also see the lip smacking, and they'll swallow hard. Yep.
Yeah,
and the licking and the lip smacking. And you can kind of see the nausea on their face. And a lot of times their little tum-tums, their little abdomens will feel bloated because they've got the air kind of sitting around in there. And a lot of times movement, if they burp with movement, that's a good indication, because the air just kind of sits in there until they shift around. So like, for example, with Darla, she'll be going along, and then she'll jump, burp. So that was my indication with her that was going on.
Do you feel like you got her gut fixed?
Darla is she's a work in progress. I'm going to say she is 80% there, but she has a lot of other factors that I would like, that pet parents also have to consider too. She's a rescue dog. And with rescue dogs, I have seen a lot of, this is happening a lot. There's a lot of issues with the microbiome, with SIBO, with acid reflux, because the stress of them being in a rescue situation or how they were rescued affects their brain. It puts them under stress. And once again, going back to the gut-brain axis. So, and pets can carry PTSD just like humans can. And a lot of times when we have a PTSD trigger installed in our brain, and our pets have them too, we have to treat the body as a complete system between food, treating the microbiome, and making sure that we keep the stress down and really foster a way for them to go forward. So, Darla's a really special case because she has anatomical issues with a partial hiatal hernia, as well as a really, really traumatic rescue. When she was found, it was really super traumatic for her. She was in literally on death's door. She's 10 pounds right now. She was 7 when they found her. She was starving to death. And it's she's a work in progress. So most of the time, what the other thing I wanted to mention, on this is how much the vagus nerve affects how our pets are digesting, because the vagus nerve is kind of in charge of HCl. So that's hydrochloric acid production in the stomach. And that's very important for the breakdown of proteins. And ultimately, once again, sending the food down to the parking lot in the right shape. And so lots of times I recommend for this, in addition to the good food, is if you've got access to a doggy chiropractor, make sure everything's in line here. A lot of animals, like if you have an animal with acid reflux stuff going on, and they also have stiff shoulders and kind of a stiff neck, there's a good chance that they got some stress going on. And there's also a good chance there might be something going on with the vagus nerve. So it's a good idea to have a chiropractor take a look and make sure the signal is flowing.
Agree. And as a former human health coach, I want to say that all of these things that you are learning about your pet, you can apply to your own health. And most especially the stress. Our pets are so empathetic. We are their very favorite thing in the entire world. They take on our stress and our emotions. So as a pet parent, you have to be really careful about being not sharing that stress with your pet as well. Do you have any tips on that, Melissa?
You're so right, Delora. That's such an important point to make, because yes, they can feel our stress. And some of the things that I have found to be important in the healing journey, no matter what it is we have to let our doggies and kitties be dogs sometimes. I think we get into this energy of, we have to fix them. Oh my gosh, there's something going on with them and we have to fix them. They can feel that. So they are like, why do I need to be fixed all the time? So sometimes if we just hold them in the energy of love and making sure we're giving them a lot of love and not stress and not always being on a journey to fix them, can be really helpful. Sometimes that can really change the tides. You'd be surprised. Keeping them in that energy of love, and rather than there's something to be fixed. I mean, I know we want to fix them because we don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to be in pain. But as you know, most of the time we can't talk with our words with our pets. They depend on our energy and they depend on our energetic levels to gauge. And that's how they communicate with us.
I love that. And as a medical intuitive, as you are, Melissa, that we totally forgot to talk about.
That's okay. That's okay.
She knows all about those things. And if you were to get a consultation with her, she'll be able to connect with your pet energetically, which is fascinating. And I want to do it so bad, but it's, you have to practice it. And yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, it's interesting how it comes along. It's like a frequency. You just got to tune the radio to them. And with Darla, it might be tuned a little too well, because I mean, we just talk all day long. I'm sure my husband thinks that we're crazy. He thinks I talk to her more than I talk to him, which is maybe true sometimes. I mean, and she's funny. Like, she really, don't think I'm crazy, people, but my dog has a really good sense of humor, and she constantly is cracking me up. Like, she'll just kind of, I should say things, but the words pop up in my head when she says things to me that just have me cracking up. Like, where did you get that? It's like when, how people say kids say the darndest things. Well, so do pets.
So let's get back to the microbiome. We kind of went down a rabbit trail.
I know we did.
Melissa and I were, I was a mentor when she went through the holistic pet health coaching course, and we had just, our sessions went way too long and we just had the best time, but
we did.
So back to, the microbiome and trying to get GERD under control. I've heard of the 4 Rs. Do you use that in your protocols? Remove. Tell me about that.
Remove, repair, restore. What am I missing here? Well,
Remove, repair, restore, and then there's another R that I forget as well. Anyway, it's to re-inoculate.
Yes, I was going to say repopulate.
It takes 2 brains here.
Yes. Yes. I do like to take that approach. And we have got, so when it comes to the microbiome, and if they're out of balance, we want to remove triggers that may be adding to the inflammation, because let's tie this back again. If we've got unbeneficial bacteria that are parked in the parking lot, which contributes to the leaky gut, and we've got leaky gut going on, and now we've got a body that is in the mode of reacting to invaders, and it just continues to contribute to the systemic inflammation cycle. So one of the first steps that we take is to remove what might be one of those triggers. And that has to, once again, fresh whole foods diet, possibly doing some food intolerance testing to see if there's something there. Because if we continue to put triggers in with a microbiome that is out of balance, then it's kind of like ripping a scab off every day. There continues to be that trigger all of the time. And so that's really an important thing. And then, repairing, making sure that we have the right probiotics in there, not necessarily just throwing probiotics at it, whether it's a soil probiotic. There's also fermented probiotics. There's fermented vegetables like Gussie's Gut. That's a great one to add because
yes, I need to give you guys a link, because we have a if you enter in Dr. Ruth, I just sent the link to the Glacier Peak sensitivity test that Melissa was talking about. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
It is. We shouldn't go down that one today. We shouldn't
go down that. But I will send a link here for Gut, and then a discount code. If you're a first-time orderer, you'll get 10% off a 3.5 trial of Gussie's Gut. So that's pretty fun.
Gussie's Gut is great, because going back to how some of these probiotics in bacteria in your gut, they ferment the food to make it accessible to the intestinal lining. And so when you're giving foods that are already pre-fermented, it's an extra little boost, because those fermentations, they break down into something called BCFAs. So BCFAs, that's branched chain fatty acids, one of which is the most important, at least in my opinion. I've actually been doing a lot of personal research on it, is butyrate. And that fuels all the cells in the intestinal lining. So I know that's a lot of like mumbo jumbo and big words, but the bottom line is that the more that we can help the gut come into balance and break down, the more we fuel the entire body.
So fascinating.
And some of these things, these are processes that, can sometimes break down as they get older. There's some pets that are just, kind of prone to this kind of stuff. Older pets and pets with chronic conditions, certain purebreds. And of course, a commercial kibble diet is going to make your pet more prone to an imbalanced microbiome.
Wow. So we've got some questions that are building up.
Okay, I can't wait.
One from Sandra that asks, what if dog cannot tolerate fermented food? And boy, we could go down that rabbit hole as well. Let's talk about histamines, Melissa.
Oh, yes, histamines. So I know, I'm just like, oh boy. So one thing that has been eye-opening to a lot of people, and maybe you already know, is that the gut, some of the probiotics in the gut, or the bacteria in the gut, are responsible for processing histamines. So when we have fermented foods, there's more histamine in that, and sometimes that can lead to more skin allergy issues, skin allergic issues, if there's an overabundance of histamine. So in that case, where you've got a dog that is sensitive to histamine, yes, avoiding the fermented foods because they're not going to break down as much. And sometimes that can contribute to more gas. Also, one that stinks to have to avoid, but is high in histamine is bone broth. So although bone broth is fantastic for the gut, in most cases, because all that gelatin and collagen in the gut goes in there and kind of smooths over the intestinal lining, making it a more habitable parking lot for the good cars, or say the beneficial cars, histamine can be an issue. So keeping it with low histamine foods, and I can give you some more info on that, the cooling proteins, so the turkey, the duck, the rabbit, and then sticking with easy ones like butternut squash, and the dandelion greens are good, avoiding the bone broth. And then in this case, where histamine is an issue, bifidos are what is responsible for processing histamine. So looking at the probiotic, I like to avoid bifidos. Anything that starts with a bifido, whatever. I like to avoid those if there's a histamine issue, and I tend to go towards a soil-based probiotic to help with that. And then also quercetin. Quercetin is going to help your pet process the histamine. It's kind of like nature's antihistamine, I like to say. Does that help answer your question?
And I have one more tip is to don't feed leftovers. So
yes.
because the histamine levels rise when that food sits and does a little bit of fermenting on its own. So make sure that you pull your if you feed fresh food, you pull that out several hours of the freezer out of the freezer to let it thaw, but not too long. So we want to keep it from building up a lot more fermentation. Okay, so we have another question. Aaron asks, back when we were talking about the vagus nerve, are there other vagus nerve toning exercises that we can do at home?
Great question. So I really like PEMF, pulse electromagnetic frequency. So PEMF mats are the sissy loop, putting it where the vagus nerve is. Also, massage in there can kind of help, because a lot of times if there's neck and shoulder stiffness, there's impingement on the vagus nerve. So that really helps. I mean, a good old walk helps too, making sure that your animal is staying active. And then another kind of crazy thing, and this might be a more energetic thing, is you can hold your dog and hum. Just hum, because the frequency of humming helps you relax your own vagus nerve. And since our animals are so often an energetic extension of ourselves, the humming and the frequency, the vibration of the humming can help with that vagus nerve. But really, acupuncture and chiropractic is a great way to do it too, because sometimes, especially in older pets, they'll have some major vagus nerve impingement that is really contributing to their indigestion.
Great answer. So I have a question. Sandra asked another question that I don't really know the answer to. So maybe you know. Does slow cooking increase histamine? I don't know the answer to that. Does any of our health coaches that are joining us know the answer to that?
I don't think so. So with bone broth, it's different because we've got the bones that are in there, and there's some fermentation that goes on with the bones and histamine, because the bone broth is like it cooks for longer. So we're cooking it for a lot longer. There's more histamines that are produced when we're dealing with bone broth. But if we're slow cooking the food, the point is to just break it down and slow cook it so that a lot of the nutrients are staying in there. So I would say that although there would be probably increased histamine compared to a fresh diet that you cooked that morning, or maybe a little bit of increased histamine from a raw diet, I don't see where there would be an increased reaction for histamine with that. But that's a really good question. And I think one that I want to look into more myself now. And I think going back to what Dolores said, it would be really important to make sure that we're just, taking out one jar. What I do is I keep glass mason jars of it and I freeze it. I just don't fill it all the way to the top
Me too.
so that I can freeze it, and just taking one out every day so it's as fresh as possible. And then after it cools, getting it into the freezer or the refrigerator right away so it doesn't have a chance to sit around. It's the sitting around that is making the histamines.
Agree. And I think that the temperature at which it's being cooked is above what the bacteria and the histamines can do to grow. But I'm just speculating here, y'all.
Great
And a
questions,
reminder,
Andy. Great
yeah,
question.
great questions. As a reminder, we as holistic pet health coaches just recommend. We cannot prescribe or diagnose or treat. So this is based on our personal experience, our research, and our amazing training from Dr. Ruth Roberts. And I'm going to take a moment to plug the training. It's a 4-month long course. And if you love this subject as much as Melissa and I do, and I see that we've got about 25 people on, and most are going to be holistic health coaches because we all support each other and we all just love this. And if you want to be a part of our community, we have Dr. Ruth is giving a free webinar next week, next Wednesday at 1:00 Eastern time. She's going to tell you all about the course and why she got into it, and just all kind of information about if you would be interested in doing this for yourself. It's a whole new career path. So many of us have, like, I used to be a human health coach. Well, I didn't like it. I don't like working with people.
We're over humans. All of us were over humans.
We are over humans. Yes. Yes. So I am going to drop a link here that will sign you up for the webinar. And basically it's a Zoom call, and Dr. Ruth will talk for a little while, and then she drops off and lets me talk for a little while. So I never know what to say, but I always manage to find some kind of word. So I'm going to drop this link right here. And I hope some of you who really, really love the subject like us will take the opportunity to just listen in, because we'd love to have you as a part of our community. One more little plug. I wore my mushrooms and cannabis will save the earth t-shirt.
And I have my
yes, you
holistic
got
pet
your
health
holistic.
Sorry, I can't. If I stand up anymore, then I come unplugged. So
oh no, we don't want you to come unplugged.
You'll get a shirt, y'all.
Yes, you'll get a shirt. Yes. Tell me about mushrooms and how that affects gut health.
I don't have as much research on what's going on with the mushrooms, but as far as CBD goes, once again, talking about the gut-brain axis and producing feel-good hormones. So of course, dogs have a huge endocannabinoid system, more so than humans. They've got more endocannabinoid receptors than humans do. So they respond especially well to CBD. So CBD is anti-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. And also there's the calming effects of CBD that is just kind of calming the whole system down. So incorporating a good CBD, like CBD dog health, can be great for the overall well-being of the dog. And once again, setting the stage for a healthy microbiome. And Delora, don't let me forget, if we have time, we do need to talk about a little bit about some of the big don'ts with the microbiome, especially in regards to antibiotics.
Yes, antibiotics, another rabbit hole. Let's answer a few questions before we.
Sure.
Erin asked really earlier, how would she determine if acid reflux? She asked much earlier, but I'll go ahead and show it. How would I determine if acid reflux is postnasal drip or acid reflux, since both seem to produce a gagging, especially when lying down?
Well, the answer to that is it is possibly both. So here's what happens. So when a dog is having the reflux, a lot of times it's going to shoot up its throat and into its nasal cavity. So that I've seen a lot of dogs with postnasal drip because the back of the throat starts to get inflamed, the inside of the tissues get inflamed. And a lot of times what happens with dogs is they reflux into their nasal cavity a little bit too, and then they start reverse sneezing because they've got that going on. So then it's a horrible feeling, and it's horrible to watch when they're refluxing and reverse sneezing at the same time, because now they've got some digestive acids in their per little nosies. So I found one thing that helps with the postnasal drip, give this a try and see if it helps, is after your pet eats, sit them up with you for about 10 minutes and don't let them run around. And I kind of it's like burping. I'm like a little baby, but Darla's little. And kind of let the stomach settle, in addition to having them on the right diet, digestive enzyme, and some of those herbs that can help soothe that. Slippery elm is one thing that can help with this. So making sure that they don't reflux in the first place is really important for that postnasal. In my experience, it has been the postnasal drip is caused by, one, allergies that have to do with the microbiome, getting that back in balance, or two, the dogs refluxing into their nasal cavity, and then that increases the inflammation and causes it.
You just had all the answers on that. I don't know what to say. That is that was
Experience.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, another question. Debbie says, my boy King Solomon, love the name, is a terrier. Worms 4 times and giardia before the age of 1. Skin issues, no hair on the back end. Allergies are so many. He needs help.
Miss Debbie, you are making our segue into antibiotics. Thank you for this amazing question, because although Delora and I have been kind of chatty Cathy's on here, this is like the root of it. This is the root of it. So your little munchkin pumpkin had giardia. My guess is that they probably gave him metronidazole, which is an intestinal antibiotic, to get rid of the giardia. Well, metronidazole in studies is showing to have long-term effects on the microbiome. Even if he had the metronidazole years ago, it changes the composition of the parking lot. So the beneficial bacteria don't have as many places to park, and more of the not beneficial bacteria, we're just going to call them the bad bugs, have been able to park. So now more than likely there's some leaky gut going on. And going back to how that affects skin, so there is undigested food probably passing through the gut lining. There have been antibodies formed against it, and the system is in the mode of attack. And so one of the first places it's going is the skin and the hair, because he's inflamed. So I would suggest getting a food intolerance test to see what his triggers are, making sure he's on a fresh whole fruits diet. And then a lot of times it's good to start with either a soil probiotic or something called megaspore, which is different than most probiotics that we see. Megaspore is important because it's actually a spore-forming bacteria. So what that means, or spore-forming probiotic, what that means is it's forming bacteria in the gut rather than just feeding what's already there. We get into issues because so many of our pet foods have added probiotics in them these days, but it's the same ones all the time. So if there's no rotation and we're feeding the same ones all the time, it doesn't contribute very well to diversity. And we really want the diversity in there. I have found that megaspore and a soil probiotic are adding and contributing to the diversity more, and should help with some of those skin issues. And the CBD dog health there's a salve that would be great for his skin and help calm him down. And hopefully you can get those skin issues resolved.
Wonderful. Great answer. Another good question is, so would you avoid carbs completely for the reflux?
The research is still out on this, and I am, in fact, doing some myself, because the bacteria in our microbiome eat the same things we do, right? Most of the time they find their fuel in digested carbohydrates, but that means carbohydrates that are plant matter, like green leafy vegetables, or in some case berries. I avoid starchy carbs because those tend to ferment too much. There's too much sugar, they produce gas, and it's just too many carbohydrates. The balance in the gut, once again, going back to it with cats and dogs, they have a different microbiome balance. Cats have the bacteria to break down mostly protein and don't really need any carbs at all. So if there's a kibble that's got potatoes and legumes and whatever in it, no bueno for kitties. But with dogs, they do have some bacteria that would support small amounts of carbohydrates in the form of non-starchy veggies and a few berries.
I like to think of the crock-pot diet that Dr. Ruth formulated as a gut microbiome building diet, because there is just so many great cruciferous vegetables, other vegetables, the ones that the orange vegetables. I mean, you feed the rainbow in order to get the best gut health, and you rotate in order to get the best gut health.
That's a really good point. Yes.
Yeah, Debbie says that she just started Whole Food, and where do we get this stuff? So
we're going to help you out there.
Yeah. So if you cook for your family, it's as simple as just adding a few items to your grocery cart and following Dr. Ruth's. You have to decide what is best for you as far as fresh food. You can follow, there's so many diets available online from great holistic vets. Of course, since we were trained by Dr. Ruth, we love the crock-pot diet. There's also raw, and there's folks that have some raw diets on there or online. And so you just do it. I personally enjoy it because I love tactile exercises, and I listen to podcasts, chop my vegetables, put it in my pot, let it cook overnight or while I'm working, and then come home and process it. And it is just a wonderful feeling to know that I am doing my very best that I can for my pet.
And Debbie, if you're more interested in some supplements regarding what might specifically be going on with your pet, send us a message, send me a DM, and I can send you links to some supplements that I like to use after the crock pot is cooked, or if you're cooking at home. And good job, by the way, taking that as a big step. I know it's a big change for a lot of pet parents. And sometimes I really get like raised eyebrows when I'm like, you could cook at home for them.
It's a tough thing to get around. It's so interesting that often the thing that is hardest to do is the very most beneficial thing you can do. And as holistic pet health coaches, our number one recommendation is to feed fresh food.
Yeah, it's it's been tough. Oh, is there another question? I'll shush.
She wants to know supplements. I think we covered some in the chat already. So Debbie, I think I put.
We can send you links, Debbie.
Yeah, I can send you another link to Melissa's information, and we're getting time. Do you have anything that you would like to wrap up with? Leave us with, Melissa.
Oh boy, a million different things. Which one do I pick? Probably one thing that we didn't get to, and I would like to touch on as we wrap up, is the testing that is going on with the microbiome. So they're doing a lot more testing on it. What scientists are trying to find is what bacteria in the gut, whether it's a bifido or a lacto or what have you, what they're actually responsible for doing. And we're finding better ways to do that. And another thing that we can do is you can test your animal's microbiome. That's very important. If you've got ongoing issues, you try a crock-pot diet and you do some intolerance testing, and we continue to have issues, going for a microbiome test where you send in a stool sample and they measure all the bacteria that's going on in the gut can be really helpful, because something that is emerging and has been helpful to Darla is she had an FMT, which is known as a fecal microbiota transplant. So it's literally the poo of another dog. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. They put it in an acid resistant capsule and they can take it like that. And it makes its way down and it does end up opening in the small bowel and can repopulate, change the composition of the parking lot, right? It's going to streamline and repopulate the beneficial bacteria. They can also do it rectally, but that's in severe situations where they most often do that, where your dog has got something like Clostridium or C. diff or C. perfringens, where a lot of times we're starting to pull away from antibiotic use when it comes to battling these, because these are the type of bad bugs. I'm going to say they're bad because they are. If your dog gets C. diff, it is no joke.
No joke.
Because they produce enterotoxins that can mess up the whole system. We are getting there with FMTs and ozone too. Ozone is becoming a new thing that we'll probably have to talk more about later, but FMT
Another rabbit hole.
I know. FMTs are a good option for dogs that have got microbiomes that are really out of balance and really struggling, especially with allergies. Lots of times after doing a round or two or FMT, we see huge improvements.
Silence. This has just been awesome, Melissa. I'm so honored to be talking to you and learning from you. This is awesome. Thank you.
As well.
So, Cindy will send us off by saying,
"Oh, I've got it, Darla. She came in. She heard my mental message. Dad, come here. Hi, there's a Darla.
Aw.
What are we doing here? Oh, no. Hi, honey. Hi. Just pulling out my headphones here. Okay. One more technical difficulty, but thank you, everyone, for loving my little pumpkin, because I sure do love her.
Oh, she's precious. So we're just going to say congratulations, Cindy, for making the switch to fresh food.
Good job, Cindy.
Huge. Keep going. Stay in tune with this community, because it is our favorite thing. If it's not the favorite thing, it's top 5.
And thank you, Delora, and thank you, Dr. Ruth, and this program. This has been a outlet for me, for my passion, for something that I have been working on for 10 years, helping other pets. And now I get to talk with amazing people like you, share my knowledge, exchange knowledge. We're all learning from each other. And it's wonderful, everybody that came on and joined today. I appreciate your support and learning with us together so very much. This is we're a movement, and we are going to revolutionize pet healthcare so that we're spending money on their health and not on their sickness.
I can't add anything better. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks, Delora.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Who is next week? I should have looked, but we're going to have another one next week. It's going to be great.
Can't wait.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.